How's it going, folks? Stu here. Over the last year or so, because of that small pandemic we ended up having, there's been a few different films which have just sort of felt like they're in release limbo, constantly getting pushed back. And one of those was Wes Anderson's latest film, The French Dispatch, which is finally coming out, and I just managed to catch it at the London Film Festival. Was it worth the wait, or do we need another one of those little pandemics to push it back even further? Now I've said it, I don't think that's a good idea, actually. So The French Dispatch is the latest film from Wes Anderson, who is a filmmaker I really love. I've enjoyed basically all of his films to varying different degrees, but he's done a whole ton of great films over the years. But being a filmmaker with a very clear and defined style that everyone seems to know at this point, I think he's getting to that point as a filmmaker where people either tend to sort of love him or hate him. And I haven't really disliked any of his films yet, but I do always have that weird sense of anticipation before a new Wes Anderson film, where I kind of feel like this is going to be the one where I get a little bit bored of his whole shtick. And with The French Dispatch, he's made arguably one of the most Wes Anderson-iest of his films for a long time, and it still works for me. I had a really great time with this. So this is essentially an anthology film from Wes Anderson, which acts as a kind of tribute to journalism that's inspired him. And I tend to be quite hit or miss with anthology films. Usually in the latter, there's something about anthology films which often bugs me and frustrates me, but I actually think that it kind of really worked here with Anderson's style and with the insane cast that he's been able to gather here, which is insane. So what's happened is, I think he's basically got everyone in this film. I'm not going to go through the entire cast. We'll be here for a very long time. You can look it up, you lazy old shit. But there are a few standouts for me and people that I found to be particularly enjoyable. So we'll mention those, huh? Let's start with Tilda. Come on. I was never going to not start with Tilda. She's brilliant. She's really fun in her role. Always love seeing Tilda, and I always love her versatility as an actress, and she's clearly having a good time here. Little Timmy Tim's in there. Oh, sorry, Timothée Chalamet, as you probably should know him as. His character wasn't the best, but I just love him, so like I enjoyed watching him on screen. Really love Benicio del Toro and Adrian Brody together in their story. They were really fun watching together, bouncing off of each other. Jeffrey Wright's great. How do I make it so he just talks to me all the time? I wanted to read me bedtime stories. That'd help me get to sleep better. Willem Dafoe was in there, although not enough. So what the fuck's up with that, Wes? How are you going to drop Willem Dafoe in a film and not have him do anything? It's kind of fucked up, huh? Owen Wilson's got a really sweet little short piece in the film that was just very charming and hugely enjoyable to watch. Love Frances McDormand in there as well. Always great. I'm quickly realizing that I am basically just going through the entire cast. All that to say, it's a very big cast, and it's an ensemble cast that I think really works. It's just incredibly funny in that very charming sort of Wes Anderson comedy way. If you've not found any of Wes Anderson's films funny up until this point, I don't think this is going to be the one to change that for you. But for me, as someone that has really enjoyed the comedic side of all of his films, this film was just brimming with it. It does fall into some of those traps that I mentioned I tend to find with anthology films, in that when you have different stories together in a film, you can't help but kind of almost rank them in your head. And if one drops the ball and isn't as good as the others, you tend to feel that more. And I think that tends to have a bit more of an impact on a film, rather than if there's an act in a film which doesn't quite flow through as much as you want. And it can be frustrating, especially when one of those stories isn't as good, because I find that you're constantly just wishing they just stuck with the good stuff. Like, why move on from something that was working to do a story that isn't as good? That's definitely still present here a bit, I think, and I think it's going to be the thing which bugs most people about it. But I don't think any of the stories didn't work for me. I enjoyed myself with all of them in their own ways. And on top of that, I think that splitting it into these different anthology films means that you're never really given much chance to get into the characters, and a result of that is that it's not quite as rich a film as some of Wes Anderson's previous films in terms of character and theme, because it's just not much of a unified whole. It's very much more this kind of fragmented, sporadic, kind of random feel to it. But I actually think that that's kind of something I really admire about this film and really enjoy about it. I actually weirdly quite enjoy the fact that there aren't really many big through lines through it in terms of character, in terms of theme. It's really relatively simple in that it's just a tribute to journalism, I guess, and a tribute to stories and being told stories. And I think the key to enjoying it is looking at it like that, more so than going into it wanting a traditional big narrative with juicy characters and juicy themes. I don't think Wes Anderson's intention here is to make something like that. I think his intention is just to sort of have fun telling stories with all these different characters. And I can't say that he didn't succeed there. I thought it was thoroughly enjoyable in that sense. And I think it's actually probably one of Wes Anderson's most visually inventive films. I mean, the look of this thing, we know what we're getting when we're watching a Wes Anderson film in terms of look, you know? And I'm not sure if this is down to the fact that there are many different stories that mean that he can get those creative juices flowing in more different ways within them, and he's able to do lots of different things. But it feels like he's really sort of flexing a lot of those more inventive, creative muscles in here. I like what he does with black and white and color in different points. There's some really interesting ways of throwing us through the stories. I mean, the more obvious parts are done in animation, which are really fun and charming. But there's a really good point where it sort of becomes a piece of theater, which I thought was really fun. And even though each story kind of worked to different levels for me overall, they do at least all have unique ways of going through their stories. And I quite like being able to look back on it and think about the different things that did work and didn't work in each different story. But I do think that's going to be slightly frustrating for a lot of audiences. It just sort of depends, I guess, with how much you get enjoyment out of just watching that creativity versus how much you need a little bit more substance to that creativity, I think. I genuinely had a blast with this one, and I think it's going to be quite rewatchable for me. I think the style and the creativeness and the inventiveness that comes with a new Wes Anderson film still feels earned and still feels like it's got a purpose. So yeah, whilst this isn't my favorite of his films, I kind of think this is probably my favorite since Grand Budapest Hotel. And it's definitely a super charming, really fun film that you don't really need to do much thinking on. You can just kick back and have a fun time with. But what about you guys? Have you managed to catch The French Dispatch at the film festival this year or wherever else it's been showing? It's out next week, I think, over here in the UK. So not long until you'll be able to check it out anyway. But let me know whatever you thought about it in the comments down below and we'll have a little chat. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see me talk about more shit, go ahead and click subscribe. There'll be a load more reviews coming. I'm sure I don't need to say this anymore. But to make sure you don't miss any of those, hit the subscribe button and make sure you're following me on all the socials down there as well, because why the heck not? I'll see you guys soon for some more thoughts on more films. But until next time, I'm going to go think long and hard about how I can infiltrate the cast of whatever Wes Anderson's next film is, because I just feel like that'll be a fun time.